Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's public webinar with TPC training entitled Best Practices for Skills Verification in Your Workplace. We are here to talk for the next about 20, 30, up to 45 minutes here, depending on questions and answers, really all about the right here, skills verification in your workplace. What does that mean? Can we break it down on what skills are and how to verify them and how to build them and grow them within your facility? My name is Ryan Smith. I'm a product manager here at TPC Training. I run our instructor-led training division and also our TPC Operate product, which is an on-the-job training product. So definitely our job as a company is to keep on task with the best practices in the training industry and across industry is in general. So that's really the purpose of these webinars, is to share some of those best practices with the greater world for people to access now and in the future. Speaking of accessing the content of this webinar now and in the future, everyone who's tuned in and registered for this webinar is going to receive a PDF copy of this presentation, as well as a link to this recording that we're giving right now on this presentation. So everyone tuning in today, stay tuned for that. This presentation will be made available on our website. Also, this is not a canned pre-recording. This is actually, right now as of March 19th, 2020, this is actually a interactive session with questions and answers. So if you see the little Q&A button up at the top of your toolbar, you feel free to type in a question for me and I'll be able to answer your questions at the end of the session. Definitely happy to answer any questions you have on the topic. So looking forward to hearing from you as well and interacting with you all a little bit on this webinar. So as we talk about skills, right, all of our companies, all of our organizations have requirements for different skills, whether it be, technical skills from the aspect of machine operation, manufacturing, harder trades like maintenance and machine operation, all the way over from, softer skills. We might call like communication skills or ability to work with Microsoft products or that kind of thing. We kind of hear the word skills thrown around a lot. Let's break down the topic. Let's really see what we can do to understand skills, how to build them, and then how to verify them. So really, here's the breakdown of today's session. We're going to talk about what are skills. I know it seems simple to us, but really I think it's good for us to say, can you define the word skill without using the word skill, right? There's some things that are so foundational, it's hard to define them without using the word itself. So let's start there. And then from there, what are some ways to build skills? What are some of the ways that we can build skills within our overall training programs? And then when do we know someone has enough skills for a job? I think that's going to be an ever-present question for you who are managing your workforce. What are the best methods to verify those skills? So now you know, let's say, what kind of skills are going to be requisite for a job and enough skills to have a job or keep a job. Then how do you verify that someone has those skills, right? That's really the key aspect. These are all kind of linchpins in the process. In doing so, I really want to talk to you about the competency mapping process that is really smart to follow as part of a skills verification program. And then finally, considerations you should consider as best practices for skills verification documentation. So how to write things down. You'll see that's a central theme of this presentation is documentation, 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 document. So if something's written down, really according to OSHA or any national standards that require training, if it wasn't written down, it never happened. So that's always going to be an important part of building skills. And we're going to find is a large gap in today's industry is that skills development and skills verification are actually not written down. So it's really hard to verify that they actually occurred. Okay? So let's start on this first bullet point. What are skills? Let's start there. What is a skill, right? Well, if you ask for the official definition of it, there's even differing opinions on what that is, but this one I really like, and this is a skill is the ability to carry out a task. Doesn't matter what the task is, right? Carry out a task with determined results, often within a given amount of time, energy, or both. So this, when we talk about a given amount of time or energy or both, that really lets us know that there's different degrees or variations of skill, right? So some people can do a task, let's say, let's say baking a cake or cooking or operating a machine or maintaining or troubleshooting a machine, right? Um, they can do this type of job in 30 minutes, or they can do this type of job in, let's say, 5 hours if given enough time to figure it out. That's really a difference in skill because of the amount of time. Or let's say they're really working hard to get the thing done versus they can do it so effortlessly because they're so good at it. That's really the variation in skill: time, energy, or both. And being able to do tasks. So skills are really task specific and are really hands-on oriented, real world oriented. This is in contrast to the term knowledge, which is really more about why things work the way they do and understanding how they work kind of theoretically. But skill is really able to carry out those hands-on tasks that basically apply that knowledge in the real world. So what are some examples of skills? Well, they can range from anything and everything. I'll keep them to the kind of technical industry related stuff. Troubleshooting electrical circuits can be considered a skill, right? A very specialized technical skill. How to repair a three-phase motor, right? So some people have that skill. Some people have never had that experience, and so they don't have that skill. How to operate a machine, in this case, an extrusion machine, but it can be any machine. We can even get as foundational as math skills, right? Does a person possess the skills to carry out tasks and, let's say, add numbers, subtract numbers, divide numbers, all that kind of stuff? Using hand tools, right? That's a very specific skill on how to safely hold and operate, you know, cordless drills or any other types of equipment. Driving a forklift, right? That's a very specific skill that has very high safety consequences if you do not keep that skill updated. You can go all the way to the soft side of things and say speaking a language, right? Speaking a language is a skill. The more practice you get and the more time you spend doing it, the better your skill becomes. Presenting in front of people, right? Us instructors here at TPC Training build that skill every week and every day and are expected to have that skill upon walking in the door. Presenting in front of people is a skill that a lot of people have that maybe certain jobs require, maybe certain jobs don't require. Using Microsoft Excel, right? Using Microsoft products in general, that's a skill. And here's just one more example: programming, right? Computer programming, HTML, that would be considered a skill that some people have and maybe some job titles would require and some don't. But you can see all these that have in common is very task oriented, very specific real world applications for building the skill and for what the skill is. So let's say on the example of troubleshooting motor circuits, let's say, or electrical circuits, what are some ways to build those skills, right? That's really the next thing we want to talk about. What are some ways to build skills, right? How can someone go from having no skill or an ability to complete a task in a certain amount of time to really being able to complete those tasks in a short amount of time and with high degree of confidence? Well, I'm gonna list off kind of today's most recognized ways to get skills. And I'm going to start from the most formal, the most official, I guess you could say, format to all the way down to the least formal format. And you're probably going to, probably the first thing that has come to your mind is the least formal format, but we're going to talk about that. So most formal obviously is college, right? Or just underneath that in terms of formalness, trade schools or apprenticeships, right? So people can learn in the classroom from an instructor or a professor on how to do this job. They're learning in a safe environment where they can learn, take questions, answer questions, that kind of thing. Trade school and apprenticeship takes it one step further, as they're allowed some hands-on experience in the field to coincide with some of the classroom training they're getting. Classroom training and virtual simulations as well. So classroom training is different from college because it's not really offered by a school or a university. It can actually be offered in the private industry, like TPC training. Uh, Companies who are in the business of doing training, you can basically rely on these companies to provide training for you. Or you can rely on classroom training in-house and train your own people in the classroom. Virtual simulations, right? So in today's 20th century, there's actually ways you can put on virtual goggles and complete this task and get practice doing a task in a safe, more forgiving environment. Let's say electrical circuits where you put your electrical device on the wrong thing inside the simulation and an arc flash will occur. Well, you're really glad that happened in the simulation and not in real life. Self-guided online training comes next, where you at your leisure can sit down in front of a computer and click through some online training modules at your own pace. And this is really, really helpful for people who work rigorous work schedules where they might not be able to take, let's say, 2 days or 3 days or 5 days out of their work week to do training. So you can maybe just sit down half-hour chunks at a time, hour chunks at a time, and take online training at your own pace. Now, going down the ladder of formality, but probably what most people would consider is the main way of building skills for a job, and that is on-the-job training, right? So consider this guy in this picture here who's operating some sort of machine, right? To learn how to operate the machine, I'm sure you would say, well, sooner than later, the person has to be standing in front of the machine and running the machine themselves, doing the job themselves, right? Getting that on the job experiential training. And that's absolutely a huge, huge factor of building skills. Kind of on the same type of the vein here, we're going to talk about job shadowing, right? So on the job training and job shadowing, I put that in quotes because job shadowing is definitely valid as a way to build skills, but we find a lot of times that the job shadowing process can become inconsistent and also um, what we call is basically tribal knowledge, where it's not documented. It's just kind of up in someone's brain. Let's say that experienced machine operator or that experienced technician or that experienced person in that job, showing someone around and showing them the ropes. And you come to find out maybe later or when it's too late that they were teaching the wrong way to do things or not the best way to do things. So the job shadowing process can really be different depending on whose job we're shadowing. And so that's really where it gets to be a little bit tricky in terms of having a standardized approach to the job shadowing process that we definitely want to talk about in this session on, how to keep that consistency going. All these things build skills. But at the end of the day, what all these things have in common is the key to building a skill is all about practice, 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 right? So practicing doing the task for yourself and practicing understanding what it takes to have that skill, right? And just continuing to build that time. I know I've heard different reports, and I think it's still out there in the cosmos on what the reality is, but I know some people say 10,000 hours, right? You have to spend on something before you're considered some level of expert on that thing. So really it's all about time dedicating to practice a given skill before you can really be considered skillful or expert at that given task. So let's say you've taken 4 years of trade school, or you've been an apprentice for, let's say, 5 years, or you took 7 different training classes from companies like ours, or you've been on the job training for 6 months now, a year, 2 years. The point's going to come for every job is, when do you know when someone has enough skills for the job, right? When do you know that this person has achieved that magical threshold of, oh, now you have enough skills, right? And I'm sure you might be raising your eyebrow at that because that's a really hard question to answer. And I wish I could just give you a magic a magic wand to say, here's when you know you have enough skills to troubleshoot electrical circuits, or here's when you know you have enough skills to speak the language of Spanish fluently, or whatever that might be. As you can imagine, it's completely up to the discretion of who's evaluating that person for that job. So in this case, it's completely up to the discretion of the employer. So whoever is employing this individual is going to be the one really up to answering the question of, when will I consider this person having enough skills for the job? I would say though, and you'll probably want to be able to consider that some employers will have more stringent requirement than others, right? So some, let's say, hiring out for, I just use the example of electrical work, right? Some might consider having that trade school license and maybe 5 years of experience on top of that and that's how much skills they're looking for. Or maybe someone else is just going to take someone right out of high school and help build their skills from there. So this will definitely change by department, by job title, by facility, really depending on the situation and depending on the tasks you need done. And then finally, some of our national and state standards do play a part in determining a framework for the amount of skills, but I can guarantee you that most of these frameworks will not get into the details of what the skills need to be. It's really up to you. They just say, yep, someone needs to have the skills. For instance, NFPA 70E, which is the national standard for electrical safety in the workplace, they say that a person who's qualified to work on electrical circuits must have skills and knowledge related to the operation of electrical equipment and should be able to identify and reduce the risks involved, for instance. Well, how much skills and knowledge is enough skills and knowledge about electrical equipment? Well, it's going to be up to the employer. But it's going to be smart for you to, again, document what those skills need to be for your facility. Write those things down. So one thing I want you to take away from this webinar is, do I have a clearly documented list of skills requirements for every job in my facility and in my organization? That could take, not always, but it could take the form of job titles, right? Do I have clearly defined job titles for every role in my facility and what's required to do those jobs? What are the tasks that are going to be asked to do that job? Or have I basically gone even one step further and done some competency mapping for each job? And basically here's the laundry list of tasks that are required during the job, and let's practice and verify that they can do these tasks as part of their training. We're going to talk about that process. But here's some other considerations and scenarios you might find yourself in when asking yourself, does the person have enough skills for a job? Here's one. What are the skills required for maintenance technician 1 versus maintenance technician 2, right? How does someone get to be, let's say, that entry level 1 technician versus what do they need? What kind of skills do they need to add to their tool belt to be considered technician 2? And are we clearly documenting the path they can take to get there? Really great questions, right? Here's another one. What are skills required for newly hired operation managers? I asked this one because I think there could be two schools of thought on this one. For instance, does that operations manager need to know, let's say, do they need to have the skills on how to start up and shut down the machines that the operators are operating? Let's say they need to know the hands-on skills of starting up and shutting down. Or do we need to focus more on the skills of communication and bringing people together and kind of speaking to large groups of people, right? And having those communication skills. Maybe that's the focus for the manager. Really, again, it depends on the employer. Maybe they require both, right? Here's another one. Here we go. What skills are needed when starting the job, right? Versus what skills can be learned on the job. This is going to be a constant question you should ask yourself. What tasks should you know that this person can do coming right in the door, straight from the interview process, versus what skills do you have confidence that they can learn on the job? And basically, where's your threshold of starting out skills and skills you're willing to have them develop while on the job? And then I want you to consider, if they can learn it on the job, are you providing them a path, and are you providing them with that training to learn it on the job? And is that training documented? We're going to go there as well. When is the operator or technician ready to work on the machine unsupervised? Right? Especially when some of our facilities are dealing with $1 million HVAC equipment or $1 million machines. When do we know and when do we have the confidence level that they can work on this stuff unsupervised and that their skill level is to that level? Again, it all depends on the employer and documenting that out. And finally, when does someone become qualified and or quote unquote certified for a job? And what does that mean in your organization? Some qualification for some might mean a pay raise is involved, and we're going to get to that. Also, maybe qualification means you're just simply not allowed to work on that machine until you're qualified. So really, it all depends on which employer you ask. So let's say you've figured it out. You're like, okay, to be a maintenance technician 1, you need to have this clearly defined set of skills, right? That's its own challenge, is getting that set of skills. But once you have that, right, they should be able to read a multimeter. Right? They should be able to test 3-phase voltage coming in a circuit. They should be able to wear the protective equipment and know how to understand ratings of their protective equipment. They should have an understanding of NFPA 70E, so on and so forth, right? And there's a big long list of things that skills that they need. Now, how do we, the really next big thing is, Well, how do we verify those skills? Right? As you know, when people are interviewing with us for a job, they will be very, how do I put it? Very optimistic about their accomplishments and about what they can do. So now it's really up to us as employers with high amounts of liability for their health and safety, right? To verify that they have these skills that we need. So what is one way to verify skills? I think the most highly recognized way of verifying skills is, again, that hands-on approach, and that's what we call a skills demonstration. So when it's time, let's say they've had enough on the job training where they feel like they're ready to demonstrate their skills, they will they will do that task. They will perform that task in front of the identified person or the expert person, whoever that is designated as the employer. Maybe their manager, maybe the person who just has the most experience on that process. And when we'll go through the process, and if that instills confidence in that person, then excuse me, then they can continue and get basically qualified to do that job. Next, on the job training checklists. On the job training checklists really take the form of, so they're similar to skills demonstration, but they're more process oriented and during the training process. So if you think about, on the job training checklists really are not just that final demonstration, but they're what the journey looks like as you are moving toward that verification. So let's say right when you get introduced how to start up a machine or how to blow down a boiler or how to do that kind of thing, you're getting the practice on these checklists and you're checking that off, or the introduction. Then you have the ability to fill out the practice section where, let's say, you're getting some practice under the supervision of your mentor. And then finally is the verification piece at the end when you're ready for that final skills demonstration. Great way to verify skills because someone is really assessing your performance at all times and their comfort level on your ability to perform these tasks. Another good way to verify skills is kind of from the verbal direction, and that is oral boards and interviews, right? So you can basically run them through a scenario, say, all right, so let's say this machine is shut down. The red light is blinking and we're hearing a strange buzzing noise coming from this cabinet. What do you think could be wrong? And letting them talk out the issue on how they would um, deal with the issue, right? These oral boards. It's really a good way to kind of show that they can verbalize what they're talking about. And that really is a whole other level of skill because they always say the people who learn the most can teach what they're doing. So basically, people really have the highest grasp and highest skill level if they can take what they know and teach it back to other people and explain it clearly to other people. So that's what oral boards are used for in terms of verifying people's skills and abilities. And finally, one that is easiest to deploy to people, but also can have some disconnection to the actual job, and that's exams and tests. I think it's a good first step there to say, all right, we're going to sit you down and have you answer these 10 questions to gauge your basic ability on this job or some other things. For instance, a lot of people like to do some basic mechanical aptitude tests for maintenance technicians, or some other tests like that of what would you do in this scenario or this scenario to gauge, your skills and abilities for troubleshooting or problem solving or that kind of thing. What all these have in common, right? What all these 4 methods have in common are that they, if they're done well, are documented. Okay, so skills demonstration, that might not seem like it should be documented, but it absolutely must be, because if you walk up to an expert person, a machine with an expert person by your side, and you show them and they feel confident in your abilities, and you walk away, you both remember that, from your own memory, but was that ever written down and recorded so that when, let's say, the both of you are not there, um, that, let's say, OSHA comes to your door and says, hey, verify that this person has been trained properly on this machine and have the skills they need to run this machine. there would be no documentation for when that happened. Oh yeah, I think that happened maybe 6 months ago, or was it 5 months ago? And what did we talk about again? What exactly did we run through during the test? Did we practice the lockout tagout, or did we practice something else? I forget. But people's memories are only so effective sometimes. So if we wrote down exactly what we went through during the skills demonstration and what was covered, uh, it really helps not only, you know, cover your trail and have a paper trail, but also a way to really let you know where the progress is along the path of giving someone the skills they need in your workplace. This might seem overkill, especially if you've been perfectly effective not having to write all this stuff down in the past. And you're absolutely right. But the first time, or maybe the many dozen times that you end up getting that headache from your employers or your employees about, hey, no one ever showed me how to do that, or or you know, what can I get trained on next, or what do I need to get to the next level of skill, of job title, or how can I grow within this organization, and those kind of talks you have with your employees. It'll be really, really smart for you as a company looking forward for the growth and advancement of your employees and retaining them as well, to have this all mapped out for them. Speaking of mapping, here's one method you can follow for really mapping out those skills for any given job. So let's say you're really going through that hard work of mapping what each job entails, right? And what skills that person needs to know. And here's just a really short example of the skills here on the left-hand column, right? What skills are required for the job you can list out. So basic troubleshooting techniques for electrical, for instance, branch circuit problems, troubleshooting those, control circuit troubleshooting, checking and replacing fuses. That's kind of the high level skill. And you can even break those down further. Performing checks as part of an assured equipment grounding program, using GFCIs and understanding how they work, types of electrical maintenance, special precautions you need to take when doing electrical maintenance, being able to either talk through that or actually verify that on the job. Understanding your safety rules for electrical troubleshooting and the OSHA rules for electrical troubleshooting. And just that goes on. That's just a small list. What this competency mapping process is all about is looking at those competencies or skills. Really, you can kind of use those same here. Competency is pretty much a very similar term to skills. The only difference being it's really what makes you competent at the job. So it's really kind of that minimum, like we call it, the minimum threshold of skill that someone needs to be able to do the job, and be sustainable in that job. So once you find out what's needed to do that job effectively as a competency, then you over here to the right hand side, you can see training course names. So basically you can map training courses that you have access to or that you're developing to these skills you need that person to have. And you can make sure all your bases are covered. So for instance, as we do on our courses here, you can see our basics of electricity for the non-electrician class covers the coverage of these types of skills in that person. And then finally electrical troubleshooting. So a different class can cover these other electrical troubleshooting specific skills, for instance. Or you can say, all right, I'm going to have shift lead X and Y go over this with them in the classroom on this date. And here's what we're going to do for these people on this date. And here's the training we're offering. Maybe it's on the job. Maybe it's online. Maybe it's virtual format. But you can list out the training here on the right-hand side and really see where your gaps are. And, oh, we aren't offering them training on that. We're not actually showing them how that works. And just ensure all your bases are covered. This is a really smart thing that a lot of larger companies are doing to make sure that anyone coming in the door can be tracked and given the training they need. All right, and next thing I want to go through is some considerations for that skills verification part, right? That's really kind of the pain point that we're finding. Yeah, we definitely are all following different levels of on-the-job training, whether you say, all right, welcome to the job, just follow this person around for 2 weeks and good luck. Or, you know, sitting in an orientation program for, let's say, 2 days or a week and saying, all right, we're going to sit here and tell you everything about the job and you're not even going to do the job, but we're hoping you have enough skills so when you get out there, you can do the job, right? It kind of goes all over the map. But at the end of the day, again, documentation is most important. Like we talked about, the skills verification demonstrations, the exams and tests you might give them, the oral boards that you might go through with them, or the on-the-job checklists you might go through with them. They all should be documented. At the end of the day, I'd say the best way to approach skills verification and documentation is that three-pronged approach I mentioned earlier. And that is introduction, practice, and then verification. So show them that you've introduced the topic. That can be really well done in a classroom environment, right? And then the practice can really be done out on the floor or on the job. But practice should never be done in a vacuum. Should always know how far along they are and be able to document their progress along the practice. And then finally the verification. We are comfortable in their ability to do that. We believe they have the skills necessary to do this without supervision. That's a really good three-step process to follow in skills development and skills verification. You might find yourself asking this now, or you might find yourself asking this in the future. How much practice is enough practice? Right? Do they need to practice just one time? Do they need to practice 2 times, 3 times? Or do they need to practice for a certain amount of time? Let's say for a week, they need to be getting consistent practice, or 2 weeks, or 6 months, or a year. It really depends on your company, right? But it's definitely worth considering, and that's a strong consideration. How much practice is enough practice before you feel like they have enough skills? And writing down that requirement. Here's another kind of detail of this whole process that we haven't really nailed down, but it's really important for you to nail down. Have a selection process for that mentor or that trainer who is going to fill out the skills verification paperwork. So if someone is standing with you doing the skills verification in front of the machine, uh, who will that person be, right? Will it be a machine operator who's been there for 30 years and really has all that experience? But what if that person is just not a good educator or not a good trainer, or doesn't see the value in filling out paperwork? Yeah, they know a lot about the job, but they don't really know how to fill out the paperwork, and they don't see the value in it, and they don't keep it up. So it really depends on who you can trust, to make good on all the training in documentation side of the training, but also B, can be a really interpersonal, really helpful, really good resource for that new hire or that new technician to learn from. So it really is a difficult one, and having a selection process and maybe a list of skills, again, another list of skills for who that mentor trainer can be out on the floor, and maybe offering them some incentive to do that mentorship on top of their regular job. I know what we offered is, just some incentives for these mentors to be considered, for pay raises and for other things, to just show that we care about them stepping up to the plate to do these mentorships, because it is some extra work for these folks. Have clearly documented list of skills, right, requisite for your job. I've kind of covered this throughout this webinar, but really having that clearly documented list of skills, writing it out, typing it out, just having it there, because once you create it for the first time, it exists and it's ready for feedback amongst your leadership at your organization. Have a defined differentiation between skills required upon hire and skills that can be acquired through on-the-job training, and really knowing where you can delineate that as well. So maybe just basic math skills and some basic mechanical aptitude to be a machine operator, but then here's the specific on-the-job training for how to start the machine and how to do specific troubleshooting of this specific machine. It's probably unfair for any company to say, all right, you need to know exactly this type of plastic extrusion machine, or this type of conveying system, or this type of air conditioner that we specifically use in our facility, without ever having worked in your facility before. But that doesn't mean they don't have skills that can get them the abilities to do these tasks timely and quickly. So really, it's kind of that differentiation is going to be important. And lastly here, having a plan, right? Having a plan for how employees can grow after skills verification is complete. So congratulations, you passed your skills verification. Now get to work, right? So really, hopefully, that this whole skills verification process, it's going to be long, it's going to be arduous, it'll be multi-day or multi-week, or maybe even multi-month or multi-year, depending on the job process. So it's difficult, and it should always come with some sort of path forward for that person getting the training that they can look forward to. Maybe pay raises, maybe increased qualifications to do different jobs, maybe increasing in their rank or their job title, or just having official qualification or certification to work in different parts of the facility, and more trust and ability to do so. So really consider that. Consider your overall company training program and skills program to see where these people fit in. And there it is. Build out skills verification into an overall worker qualification program. Because having an overall qualification program is really going to be make or break in terms of people's freedom they have to build their whole program out. So all these things considered, I want you to ask yourself, how am I doing, right? Where am I along this path of having this stuff documented and written out? Maybe there's some work to do on the documentation of what skills are required. Maybe we don't have job titles for all of our jobs. Maybe we do. Maybe we have a little bit too much tribal knowledge where this job shadowing is happening in a vacuum, and we're not really sure what they're going over out there on the floor. We're having trouble keeping track of that. Again, really good idea to start getting those checklists written out and deployed out there to the people we trust to make good on them. At the end of the day, there's going to have to be some sort of, here's the last one, some sort of well-organized training file system. Can't recommend this enough, right? In today's world, the minimum is, having some sort of file cabinet, kind of like this picture you see here, binders and just paper, right, floating around that has everyone's training checklists and everyone's list of skills and their competency mapping and their practice and their verification and all that kind of stuff. Lots of paper. As we're all too aware, paper is slowly getting phased out, thankfully, because paper can get destroyed, it can get lost, but thanks to electronic documentation and training systems, you really don't have to worry as much about paper in today's skills verification world. It can really take the form of let's say, mobile, documentable, fillable forms that you can, let's say, run them through the skills verification of, let's say, the electrical work job. You made your own custom form on a custom platform, and you filled out the stuff on an iPad or a tablet or something, and boom, it's all documented to a central system that everyone can access in your management team, and you're off to the races. So you don't really have to worry about. And you can even do signatures and initials and official sign-offs right with the technology and right with these iPads. So really, the technology has really brought us far in today's world. And mobile forms and on-the-job training is no longer just in the classroom, guys. There really is more than just sitting in a classroom doing training. And documented training can be at your fingertips at all times using mobile technology, and that's really where the industry is headed as well. And that's really all I have for you today. So I'd like to open the floor for any questions. I think maybe a couple have come through here. And again, if you have more questions after this session is over, we're experts on kind of all this stuff here at TPC Training. Feel free to just give us a call and ask more questions. We really enjoy having these more high-level discussions with you to see, what skills verification is looking like in your facility and how we can help. So let me open the chat line. Let's see what we got. So if someone was having audio issues, hopefully you got that figured out. Sorry about that. The one question I got here is, do we need to validate the tests? And really the validation of what, let's say, these exams or tests are, again, it's all up to you as the employer. Do you want to validate the accuracy of the test? Really, I think you might even want to write the tests yourself, so you'll know as a company. Let's say the plant manager or the production manager will write the test themselves to know exactly what skills they need to test for. That will be the validation in and of itself. But really, that's a good question in terms of third party, in terms of knowing whether the test is accurate to what the skills need to be. Again, it's all up to the employer on how you choose to validate those tests. All right, you all, that's all I have for today. I hope you found this engaging and interesting as kind of the overall state of the art when it comes to skills verification in your workplace. There's a lot of ways to approach this, and I hope I at least struck your curiosity on a few ways you might be able to move forward from here in making some improvements, and also knowing just what those best practices are for skills verification. There's always room for improvement, especially when it comes to writing things down and documenting them. We're all human. We all know that we sometimes just have discussions and we don't really write them down, or we do things on the job and we don't really write them down. But The more you can write down about people's progress in developing these skills, the more empowered they can feel in how they're growing and improving within your organization. So thank you so much for being here and have a wonderful day.